Yo, Madeline.
Yo, how's things?
Good. I'm just food prepping.
Are you shredded yet?
Not enough. Never enough.
Not enough.
Not enough. It's never
Have you
enough.
got adductor veins yet?
Yes.
You've got adductor veins? Shut
No,
up.
I'm joking. No, you'd fucking know if I did. I'd be like, oh my God, it'd be everywhere.
Honestly, that little picture, that little video that you put on Instagram the other day, Corey was like, oh my God, Corinne's so lean.
And I was working out, I was like, I've still got 15 weeks to get inside out. It's good.
Glutes,
It's
mate,
good.
you think you're peeled and then you turn around and it's not there.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, ta-da, disappointment. It'll come.
2 weeks out from the front
Time.
and 2 weeks out from the back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, where is everyone? I know I literally just dropped this in the group, so everyone's probably like half asleep.
Don't know, there's 9 of us on. There's something aesthetically pleasing about prep trays, isn't there? You know, when they're all in their little divided, and they're all like,
oh, that's a beautiful sight, that is.
in
I
there.
can't say I've ever owned a piece of Tupperware that looks like that.
It's just, I don't know, it sorts out my OCD and it makes me feel really calm.
Organised.
Which is
Laura, how's the ear?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you imagine? Like, I'm always online and for some reason I still can't figure out Zoom on my phone. My ear's fine actually. My ear's completely normal now. It's like I'm not in pain or anything, which is amazing.
Yeah, novelty.
It was actually the worst 11 days of my life. Like I thought I was being really dramatic through the whole event. I was like, maybe I'm just,
No,
you know.
I just don't know why it's not letting me see my. Sorry.
But yeah, much better now.
Is Hannah George on here? No. Where is she? Where is she? She messaged me. I'll start in 2 seconds.
I love you, always right, always together.
Who's singing?
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna give it 2 more seconds.
Well, I'm here. I don't know if I'm muted or not. Huh? What? No, I'm not.
No. Not on scratch. Like people to join. Here we go. We're filling up. We're filling up.
Oh God. Sorry.
We're filling up. We're filling up. Is everyone asleep? What are they doing? Right, I'm going to start. Right, I'm going to start. Anyone who's not here can do one. Everyone's on muted as well. This is fantastic. Love this. Oh, I think someone else is jumping on. Right, I will begin. I've just put a message in the group saying, if the rest of you don't turn up, this is horrendous turnout. That means 60 people asleep. That pisses me off. Right. This will go on YouTube as well, so if anyone wants to watch it back, they can do, or share it, or whatever. Okay, thank you. We've got 2 other people on this call as well, so thank you for joining. Hope this is helpful. I'm going to share my screen. So you will have seen that I was going to be talking just about menstrual cycle, and I think, like most of you, apart from Lewis, are all oral females. So you probably are quite astute with your menstrual cycle. You probably know how it works. Hopefully you know how it works, but you might not know a little bit more intricate details and how it maybe affects you, maybe how it affects you in your journey, how it affects you month to month. So that's the kind of thing I'm going to talk about. And then I'm going to talk briefly at the end about contraception, but that is a big, big hole we could go into. So I'm not going to go into loads and loads of detail, but I'm just going to talk briefly about how it affects your menstrual cycle and your hormones. And then kind of what I want as I go through this, and I know I say this all the time and people are a little bit shy, but please jump in, and I'm going to try and make it a little bit interactive. So like, if you feel like you don't want to talk, or you obviously don't want to share your experience, then you don't have to, but people will have massively, massively different experiences of this. Like, everyone's menstrual cycle is different. Everyone's story around maybe their contraception is different. Everyone's gets different symptoms. People have gone through different things with their hormonal health. And if you've got something to add or you want to talk about it, please, like, it's very interactive. Don't wait till I finish, just sort of like jump in. Okay. So make my screen big. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
I did it as a little PowerPoint. I thought that would be easier. I often don't do a PowerPoint, but I thought, do you know what? So I'm going to do one. So, okay, female menstrual cycle and effects of contraception on it, essentially. So what is the menstrual cycle? So essentially, this is something that every female should, in theory, go through every single month. And it is the process of your, I need to mute somebody.
Please.
No, it's Kaz. It is, I've muted you, Kaz, don't worry. It is the process of your body going through a process to be able to receive a fertilized egg. So essentially, during the whole phase, and I'll go through individual like areas of the cycle as we go through this, but it is your body growing increasing your uterine lining, your endometrium, that's ready to receive a fertilized egg. And it's a cyclical process, happens every single month. So uterus sheds the uterine lining, and that's where you get the bleed. So this is something that for every single person will usually start, obviously, early on in your teenage years, from the age of like 10, 11, some people much later, and most people will stop having a regular cycle by the time they're 50, maybe a little bit older, sometimes a little bit before then. And that's where you are going to be hitting the menopause, where this process starts to diminish due to hormonal fluctuations and deterioration. It's usually 28 days. Now, I've had people come to me who I coach who have had periods or menstrual cycles that are like over 40 days, and they think that's normal, or they have bleeding all the time and they think that's normal, because that's maybe they've not conversated about it before and it's not something they've ever really thought about or discussed. But a normal cycle is about 28 days, but a healthy cycle is anything between about 21 and 35. So you always count day 1 as your first day of bleeding, which is your menstruation. A lot of people think you count day 1 as like the day you finish bleeding, and that's the first day of your cycle, but it's not. First day of your cycle is always the first day of your bleed. So if I was to say to you how many days since your cycle, you would count from day 1 of bleeding, how many days it is post that. So in theory, it should be 28 days from day 1 of bleeding to day 1 of bleeding. Okay. If you fall outside of that 21 to 35 days, it is probably worth having a little bit of a look at your cycle. How many days is it usually? Tracking your cycle is really important to understand how long yours is, and just have a little bit of a think about what that looks like for you as an individual. And if anyone's had any experience with this, please just jump in. You don't have to put your hand up. But if you want to talk about that and add, you can. So the timeline of your cycle. Now, hopefully everyone can see that, but you've got here, I'm just going to make my, there we go. Here is what it looks like. Has everybody seen something like this before? Or is there anyone here who literally hasn't got any idea how these hormones work in the cycle? Or, okay, I'll rephrase the
Sure,
question.
I've always had a little bit of a weird experience, but I
Yeah.
don't say I fully understand it. So maybe if you can explain it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go through it. Just don't know if anyone's, obviously, it's nice to know if people have had any experience or understand this at all. So essentially, this is day one here, right down here. This would be when you would start bleeding. So day one here would be like first day of your bleed. At the start of your bleed, you've got your menstruation. This is what we call it. So your bleed is menses or menstruation. A lot of people call it your period, but it's menstruation. It's your menses. It's when you bleed. Okay. Now that can last, and I'm going to go through these like individually in a minute. But menstruation can last usually 1 to 5 days, sometimes a little bit longer, but your main bit of bleeding is usually 1 to 5 days with maybe a little bit of a tail off after that. When you go through menses, you've got a low level of hormones here. Like nothing's really going on. It's pretty low. Estrogen is low, progesterone is low, and you're going through the bleed. You're going through your bleed. After that, you enter the early and then late follicular phase. And the easy way to remember it, because people get follicular and luteal mixed up. Follicular, is F for first, and luteal is L for last. So your follicular phase always comes first, and then your luteal comes last. So it's a nice little way to remember it. But your follicular phase is this bit in the middle. So it's the bit from the start of your bleed up until ovulation, which is in the middle. Now, ovulation is where you ovulate, you release an egg. So this period here, everything before it, but everything after the bleed is your follicular phase. And this is where you'll start to see increases of mainly spikes in estrogen, okay? Then you go through ovulation. When you go through ovulation, and I'll go through this in these further slides, your estrogen drops off, your other hormones drop off, but your testosterone peaks. So a little bit of a good thing to understand about this is that you can see here, like your testosterone is pretty flatlined all the way through your cycle. So if you're someone that's going to be getting bloods done, we want to avoid getting bloods done around ovulation, because if you get bloods done around ovulation, you're going to see a huge peak or surge in your hormones, which doesn't give an accurate representation of where we are throughout the rest of the month. Like your testosterone is pretty flat generally throughout your whole cycle, apart from here. So I've seen people get their bloods done here and they'll be like, look at my testosterone, it's really, really high. And you work out their period and they're right in the middle of their cycle and they're ovulating. So the results are pretty rubbish. And you're better off doing them again because it's not an accurate representation of where you sit throughout the whole month. And that ovulation phase is about 24 hours. It's not actually very long. So if you hit your bloods right on that phase, although it confirms when you're ovulating, it's not that helpful from a bloods perspective. From a bloods perspective, we want to be getting it done here, where we should be seeing peaks in estrogen, more consistent peaks in progesterone, a more consistent estrogen level, and a consistent testosterone. It's a better reflection of where we are and where our menstrual health is if we can do it here, because there's a lot less going on. Which would be 7 days pre-bleed. So you've got your ovulation, then you've got your luteal phase. So you've got menstruation, follicular, ovulation, luteal, and then you've got menstruation again. So day 28 should be when your bleed would then start, or going into day 29, which then starts the process again. And this process then is cyclical every single month. Has anyone got any questions about that as an overview? I'm going to go through each phase now, but has anyone got any questions about that in particular?
Matt, can you just like confirm when would be the best ideal time to get blood work done?
Yeah, if you know when your cycle is, if you're tracking your period, 7 days pre-bleed, ideally,
Okay.
which will put you about here, which is where we predict progesterone to be its very, very, very high. So we would then be able to see when our progesterone is at its highest. Obviously, if we're able to time that nicely on 7 days pre-bleed, then we know that that's the highest peak that our progesterone gets to in our cycle. Okay. We also know that if our progesterone is rising like that and we know that we have a bleed, we know that we are actually having an ovulatory cycle and it's not just a bleed. So yeah, 7 days pre-cycle here, where progesterone is at its highest, estrogen is starting to is not at its peak, but it's at its second peak and it's starting to drop off, and testosterone is consistent. So yeah, if you have a 28-day cycle, day 21, if you have a 35-day cycle, you want to go 7 days back from your bleed. So you'd be looking at day 28, 27 to 28, ideally. Because often, and I'll go through this in a minute, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but if you have a cycle that isn't 28 days long, it's like 35 days long, the likelihood of this is that your follicular phase is longer and your luteal phase is pretty consistent at about 14 days. So you'll find that ovulation actually pushes to like maybe day 20. And if that's 6 days late, your bleed will then be 6 days late. But your luteal phase is generally more consistent in terms of a time frame. And it tends to be the follicular phase and this increase in estrogen that sometimes seems to take longer with females. And that's down to all sorts of a host of different reasons. But yeah, so that's hopefully that answers that question. Is that helpful?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So menstruation. Obviously I've just covered this in brief, but day one, your uterus lining, which is prepared already at this point for implantation of an egg, starts to shed. So this is where you've not got a non-fertilized egg, like is not then embedded into the uterus lining. So the uterus lining sheds away, and that can last 3 to 5 days. It's not the egg that really causes the bleed. It's the shedding of the uterus lining. The egg is so small when it's an unfertilized egg. It's the smallest thing. It's like microscopic. So realistically, that's not causing the bleed. It tends to get absorbed. It dies. It's the shedding of the uterus lining that you get the bleed from. Estrogen and progesterone drop. So you see here, like progesterone and estrogen are dropping down, come right to the bottom of where they would be. And then you've got this non-fertilized egg is shed with the uterus lining causing the bleed. Testosterone remains consistent. This is where obviously most people get all of their symptoms. A lot of people are like asymptomatic throughout the whole cycle until they get to their menstruation. Probably the day that you're going to start bleeding, you might bleed in the evening, or you'll have pain in the evening, you'll bleed the next morning. You'll start getting like cramps, tender boobs, bloating, mood swings, low back pain, headaches. Like I feel like every single person can relate to that. People get these with different degrees. And if you do have some kind of like menstrual health issue or hormone imbalance that you're aware of, or potential PCOS or PMDD or something like that, you tend to get much worse symptoms than other people. And there are ways you can manage symptoms. Obviously, there's medication, but also improving like just general health can help with this. And there's a lot of things that we can do. But obviously, everyone pretty much, I imagine, will understand the symptoms related to menstruation. So you know when you're menstruating, main thing is obviously you have a bleed. So following menstruation, you've got obviously this phase here, which is your follicular phase, follicular for first, F for first. So you have your follicular phase first. Follicular phase is literally from the day one of bleeding. So as soon as you start bleeding, we're calling that your follicular phase. You've menstruated, the body started to shed the uterine lining, and then you started your follicular phase. So follicular phase is in then. This is where, now I don't want to get super technical here and absolutely like confuse people, but this is where your hypothalamus signals your pituitary to start releasing FSH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. So what happens in your follicular phase, again, F for follicle stimulating hormones, so it's nice and easy to remember, your ovaries then produce follicles. Now they can produce between 5 to 10 to 15, 20 follicles. Now, your follicles contain an immature eggs. The healthiest egg out of all of these eggs will mature, and the other follicles just
That's sorry to interrupt. TV, somebody's TV is on, and it's making it really difficult.
Sorry, I'm gonna mute the telly.
Sometimes I think it's helpful unless everyone's talking, to just maybe just stay muted, and then we can, because otherwise it gets kind of jumbly. It's pretty easy to pick up sound.
Yeah.
I've muted it. It's okay.
So your ovaries produce follicles. Your follicles contain immature eggs, and then the healthy egg will mature. So once that egg's matured, your other follicles are reabsorbed, gone, not needed. Now that follicle, that matured egg, sets off an estrogen surge, and your uterus lining then thickens. Because if you think about it, you've now got this healthy mature egg that's making its way down the fallopian tube, and your body signals an estrogen surge to thicken that uterus lining, and you can see it in here. So this is where your estrogen rises, you get your uterus lining thickens, and you're literally ready to, or getting ready to receive this nice mature egg. Okay. Now this is usually about 16 days long and can range from 11 to 27, obviously depending on your cycle length. Obviously, if your follicular phase is 27 days long, you can see how much that's going to push your cycle out. So just think about maybe your symptomology and maybe where that sits you in terms of what, if you are tracking your cycle, what that looks like to you. And understanding your cycle will really help you understand like where you are in the month, maybe symptoms you're getting, maybe weight fluctuations, and understanding how your body feels in these phases as well. So that's follicular phase. Now, follicular phase literally finishes as you ovulate, okay? So you get this rise in estrogen in the follicular phase. This triggers your pituitary to then release LH, luteinizing hormone, which is what makes you ovulate. So this nice mature egg that's now waiting in the ovaries to be released, your ovaries release this egg, travels down the fallopian tube, hopefully to some nice sperm at the bottom. And this is usually around day 14 to 16, something like that. Like I said earlier, if your cycle is longer, count 14 days backwards from your predicted bleed, because it tends to be the follicular phase that lasts longer than the luteal if there is a disparity in your cycle. So you only ovulate really around like a 24-hour period. Like it doesn't take very long. Like once you've had this signal with estrogen, your body then triggers and releases this luteinizing hormone, and then straight away the mature egg starts to move and travel down the fallopian tube. Obviously, this is where we're hoping within this sort of time frame that you're going to be fertilized or receive sperm, hopefully. Obviously, if that doesn't happen, you obviously go into this luteal phase. So your ovulations happen, you come into the luteal phase. Now, a few things happen in the luteal phase. After you've released this nice mature egg, the follicle, not the egg, the follicle it's released from, turns into corpus luteum. Now, this signal releases your progesterone pretty much mainly. So if I go back to this, you see the ovulation happen here, estrogen come down, you get this corpus luteum, you get this effect here where your follicle turns into corpus luteum, and that produces progesterone. And this is where you get this big spike in progesterone. And that big spike in progesterone is what says to us that you've ovulated, the follicle has now changed, and now you've got this big surge in progesterone, and then that's what essentially causes you to have this bleed, okay? So this is why it's important to get your bloods done 7 days pre-cycle, because we can see that change. If you don't get this surge in progesterone, it's likely you didn't release a mature egg, and that bleed that you're going to get is likely not an actual ovulation bleed, and it's more, and it's a withdrawal bleed, or it's something else, okay? So that's a really, really, really important thing to think about when you're getting your bloods done. So this rise in hormones keeps your uterus lining thick, ready for the egg to implant. Obviously, if the egg isn't fertilized, the luteum dies, decreased hormones, everything just drops to zero pretty much. Everything comes down. You've got a non-fertilized egg, nothing has happened. So the uterus lining realizes it's prepared for this egg to happen, or to be embedded and matured and fertilized, and it doesn't happen. So everything then drops off. And this is why, like, you often feel when you get to menstruation here, pretty weak, not amazing, like you might feel that your sleep is really poor, like you have quite a lot of symptoms of just like everything being in the floor. How you can literally imagine, like if I said to you, oh, if your hormones are flatlined, how would you feel? And you'd probably say, yeah, pretty shit. So that is essentially what happens, literally that day before your cycle, 2 days before your cycle, when everything is on its way down, that's that feeling that you get, and that's why you feel like that. You tend to feel like that through the first few days of your cycle. Obviously, if we then go back to menstruation, and then once you're kind of like 2, 3, 4 days into your cycle, that estrogen starts to pick up. So you can see that here. So that's kind of hopefully that kind of resonates with how you feel as well when you're going through your cycle. But this pickup in estrogen, one of the reasons why people often say like your follicular phase is a really good time to train when you're coming up to this ovulation, is because your testosterone starts to peak and your estrogen is really, really picking up. Now, estrogen is a really important hormone for muscle growth, for energy, for recovery. You hear about like ladies who've gone through the menopause or had like menopausal symptoms or perimenopause will tell you that they feel like they've got no energy. They'll feel like they don't recover very well. They'll feel like their sleep is really poor. And that's because they don't go through often this phase in here. So the estrogen is very, very, very low. Okay. So if you do have a cycle, It's fantastic. So enjoy it and be thankful for it. But symptoms of your luteal phase, that back end of your cycle, obviously this is where everything's starting to come down to the bottom, where you're going to start to feel terrible. You've got bloating, sweating, mood changes, bit of weight gain as well. So and I mean, most people here who have a natural cycle, most people will gain something between ½ kilo and 2 kilos on the lead up to their bleed. That week prior, like especially if someone's got a long cycle. Kaz, just mute your microphone. It's easier. And then if you're feeling things like this on the lead into your period, like super normal, and it is just a result of your hormones coming down into the floor, which is you are here we go, very normal to feel like that. So when people say to you like you're in the gym, or people are like, yeah, you can push through it, sometimes like if it's the day before you bleed, if you can, or if it's 2 days before you bleed and you can push through it and you've got the energy, that's great. But the reason why it affects people so much on their cycle is because you're used to this, you're used to these fluctuations, you know how good you feel here and how much better you feel here. And then when you get this massive dip, it feels awful. It feels like someone's sapping the life out of you. And that's why it can feel really difficult here. Things can feel heavy. You can feel more fatigued. Sleep isn't as good. Recovery isn't as good. And that only lasts a couple of days. Like it lasts 1 to 2 days usually. Sometimes it's like 6 hours. But it's a little slump that your body goes through. And that can have a really obviously negative effect on you as an individual, whether that's with your training, whether it's at work, whether it's in your relationship, whatever. Does that make sense to everyone? I don't want that to be complicated. I tried to give like a really like high level overview, but does that make sense to everybody? Talk to me, unmute.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question? Obviously, because I'm on HRT,
Yeah.
because I'm going through the perimenopause now. I started my periods when I was 9, so like I'm early starting the perimenopause as well. It's been like a couple of years. Now, do those spikes still apply to me even though I have like the coil fitted and I take like so I have the coil for progesterone and I have the patches for estrogen? So will those spikes still apply?
Yeah, which do you have the Marina coil for progesterone?
Yeah.
Yes, there's different things here. HRT is like literally hormone replacement therapy. So like the estrogen that you take is it in patches?
Yeah.
So the estrogen that you take in patches is it's like a bioidentical, as best that they can do, of estrogen. So when you have the patches, and it depends, some people have 14 days on patches, 14 days off, some people have 28 days continuous, some people will have like 28 days continuous, but they'll be like half the amount in the first 14, then more in the second lot of 14, same with progesterone, depending on how you do it. Your peaks won't happen if you have continuous HRT. So what you should feel, and what a lot of people feel when they take HRT, especially if they've got consistent estrogen, is that you might not peak here, but what you'll have is like a consistent, it's not your estrogen, it's a synthetic estrogen, which is as bioidentical as possible. So when you get your bloods done, it will show as estrogen on your bloods. You'll get a line kind of that looks something like this, somewhere in the middle. So what the point is with someone who's perimenopausal or menopausal is you don't need these cycles because you're not trying to have a period. You're not trying to menstruate because you're not trying to create life and have children anymore. You need hormones to put you in a good feeling state. That's what you need hormones for. A good feeling state, a good recovery state, a good sleep state. So you have hormones for that reason. So you essentially are brought up or given a level which is good, is helpful for you. And everybody's different. Some people feel really good on 50 milligrams of estrogen. Some people feel really good on 100, 75, 125, whatever it is. And that's where obviously your GP or gynecologist or whatever will work with you for that. Your progesterone, however, and it's funny that you said that about the coil, there's different, and I'll come on to this with contraception in a minute, but there is different types of like, I guess, different types of like synthetic hormones. So you've got like bioidentical, which gives you like the feeling of having these hormones. And then you also have like, which is how contraception works a lot of the time as well, is that it's not bioidentical necessarily. It's like, it stops your body producing your own hormones. It'll give you synthetic hormones, but they're not necessarily bioidentical. So there's a lot of different different synthetic hormones out there. Some are better than others. I know that some progesterone pills are a lot better than others are in terms of being bioidentical, but the Mirena coil isn't necessarily replacing your progesterone. What your Mirena coil is doing is giving you a really, 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 really low dose of like synthetic type progesterone, which essentially stops you from ovulating if you could ovulate, right?
Yeah.
By almost blocking your body from producing its own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I actually don't see a period. I think we discussed this on, through
Yeah.
checking and things. I don't actually see a period, but I get like a couple of days before I'm on the floor, I feel like crap. I can't get,
Yeah.
the motivation. I feel tired all the time. And then it's
Yeah.
almost like, yeah, okay, yeah, perhaps I get like a tiny little show on one wipe and that's it,
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't have like an ovulatory cycle. So I'm going to come on to this now. So it's good that you brought that up. I'll come on to that in a second because that's something that I'm going to explain in here. So I'll go through this first and then just hold that thought, okay? Because I've got this on one of these slides. But with that, has anyone else got any questions about the cycle? Maybe like how it affects them particularly, like any symptoms or anything like that?
Mads, I think what I've noticed for me as well, that dip right after ovulation is brutal. For me personally, I would say that that's actually even more so than right before it, like the period actually starts. And
Yeah.
I also don't know, because we have that like estrogen boost, the testosterone boost. And for a long time, I've wondered how much of that is me overextending myself in the gym as well and just pushing it really, really, really hard. And then kind of having 3 to 4 days afterwards where I plateau and I feel like my strength takes a hit, or if it literally is just those hormones or a combination of both, really.
I suppose that's a good point, and I've got a couple of clients who are the same there, and they feel ovulation really bad, because this peak and trough is quite severe. But they're also somebody then at the same time consequently have like quite bad symptoms around their cycle as well. But they do feel this ovulation here. They do feel it. It's quite normal. And I think people don't really talk about it because it's not really something so much spoken about, but a lot of people do actually experience symptoms quite a lot here. I've got a girl who gains about 1 kilo when she ovulates and then it drops off after 2 days. So yeah, it gives these sort of symptoms and you can kind of see why, right? It kind of makes sense. So she gets these sort of symptoms and really moody, really stressed, really anxious for about 24 hours. And that's how she knows she's ovulating. Before she would even look, she'd be like, I feel like it's that time. So yeah, she knows. But I think that's why like what we do and like how you track what you're doing in the gym is really important, because if you're pretty consistent with the days you train, the time that you train, your intensity in the gym, what you eat before you train, your like logbooking, so your intensity and drive is always the same. If you feel that drop off more around this, call it ideally day 16 or something, whatever it would be for you, if that was the time that you felt that, then you kind of know that it is ovulation related. If you were somebody, because you're super consistent, really, like you follow a plan, like you're being coached, like you're generally very consistent. If you were someone who wasn't consistent, you could say, well, it might be because your nutrition's been bad for a few days and this week you decided to push hard in the gym and last week you didn't. But for someone like yourself who's pretty consistent, if you get those symptoms around that time, yeah, you could definitely say that it's you ovulating 100%. Definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If I may, I don't know if I'm unmuted or not now, I'm confused.
Yeah.
With me, obviously, I'm more sort of in the group of pre-menopausal. So yeah, with the cycle, I also got a copper coil fitted, so that is a different. I presume I've got no hormones whatsoever. So with me, it varies in terms of, like you said, you might feel your strength going down and then gaining the weight. And with me, despite the fact that I consistently train and eat and pretty much got same routine day in, day out, it varies from cycle to cycle in terms, even they are not very regular, like I suppose when you're in your teens, they are pretty much almost to the day. But now it varies in terms, it could be, I can have 3 weeks between, or sometimes 4 weeks between. And it's just some days, some months are my strength goes out of the window and I'm absolutely shit back like I'm today. So it is probably coming within the next couple of days. But there are some months that the strength is absolutely still on the same level. So it's just I'm a bit confused with my hormones.
Depends massively. Each person's individual, and obviously, like if you are pre-menopausal, perimenopausal, and you're in that state, like your hormones are not going to look quite like this. They're going to be a little bit all over the place. And that's why you get those irregularities. And that's why it's really important that you track your cycle. There is an app that I use called Flow, F-L-O. It's free.
Okay.
It's very, very, very good. And you can track your cycle and track your symptoms. So on there, it'll ask you about energy, mood, sex drive, sleep, focus, hunger, what you're craving as well. Not just cravings, but like what you're craving. Like it's very, very, very in depth. It's very good. And you can track it every single day. You can track how you feel every single day on it, and it'll create predictions for you based on your cycles, your symptoms, your sleep, your temperature. It's very, 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 very good. So natural cycles is very good as well. But yeah, you can track those. But yeah, if you are in a state where you're perimenopausal or premenopausal or menopausal, you're going to, or you've got another kind of issue with your menstrual health, then you are going to get different symptoms, and it is going to vary quite a lot. The copper coil is non-hormonal, so your hormones can still come through. Copper coil is completely non-hormonal, so it doesn't mess with your cycle unless you've got some kind of like disorder to copper. Like you've got no issue with that. But moving on to that, like some things that cause problems with your cycle or your menstrual health, short-term or long-term, you've got tracking your cycle. That's not a problem, but that's like track it to see if you've got problems. So make sure you're tracking your cycle to see if there is any problems there. And then things that would potentially cause problems with it, a disparity, maybe any issues would be taking birth control. That's going to have a problem with your cycle because stop you having one. Any birth control that is hormonal. Pregnancy, obviously, PCOS, that's an issue with a hormonal imbalance. Endometriosis isn't hormonal, but will cause problems with your cycle, whether it's symptomology, when you are on cycle, symptomology off cycle, like it's still something that is going to cause a problem, even though it's not directly hormonal. Anomiosis, very similar to endometriosis. One's inside the ovary, one's inside the uterus, one's outside. Then you've got fibroids potentially in the uterine lining, and then you've got eating disorders as well, which I think a lot of people don't realize. And it's very, very similar to PrEP. Like a PrEP is not an eating disorder. Let's not call it that, but it's very similar. Like in the extremities on the body are similar. So if you have an eating disorder and you spend long time in REDs, like relative energy deficiency, you haven't got good nutrition, it's kind of similarly what happens in PrEP, especially if it's a long PrEP and you're someone who has to get absolutely inside out peeled. You are going to spend quite a long time with a low amount of nutrition. Like that is the reality of, say, doing something like figure, for example, where you honestly get inside out peeled. Like that is potentially going to be a problem. Okay. Symptoms of you having a problem is like irregular periods, amenorrhea, which is having no period, and it's defined as no more than 90 days. So 3 months essentially, like the doctors only say, oh, you've got amenorrhea, and that's just a posh word for saying you don't have a cycle. But if you haven't had one for 3 months, that's what they would say. It's essentially the absence of a hormonal cycle, obviously down to, there could be a multitude of reasons as to why you might not have a hormonal cycle. Then you've got a bleed for more than 7 days. If you are bleeding for more than 7 days when you have a period, I'm not talking about a little bit of like, I'm not talking about a little bit of discharge at the end that's maybe a little bit discolored. I'm talking about bleeding for more than 7 days for a cycle. Then there's potentially or probably something there that is a problem. High blood glucose readings as well. That's a really high indication of something like PCOS and insulin resistance. If you've got really high blood glucose readings when you wake up in the morning in a fasted state. And when I say high, I'm talking about anything really, unless you are very overweight or previously had issues with being very overweight or obesity. Anything above the mid-5s for a blood glucose reading in the morning probably suggests some insulin resistance. If you've got PCOS, I'm probably saying it's probably sitting into the 6s quite heavily into the 60s if would indicate some kind of problem potentially. There could be other reasons why blood glucose reading is high, but from a menstrual cycle point of view, especially if you're getting other symptoms of menstrual dysfunction, that's quite a high like marker for me. And then if your period is less than 21 days apart or more than 35. So if you're having a cycle that is 40 days, 45, 48 days, like that does say that you've probably got something going on there from hormonal dysfunction standpoint. Has anyone got anything they want to add to that, whether it's like issues that they've had with their period or problems? Obviously you don't have to, you might not want to share, but if you do want to share, then like if anyone wants to add to that, please feel free to just jump in and shout at me.
My periods have got better since I've been with you. So I was never on any. I haven't been on contraception for like 5 years or anything like that. But I don't know, probably because of my fitness. But my periods were awful, and they've got much more regular since, because I'm on a number of SAPs as well, and obviously my insulin sensitivity is rubbish. As we found out first thing in the morning. And since we've addressed that, like my periods have got much more stable and much more like less painful and more consistent. So yeah, just what I'd say. Which is good.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think with it's obviously it's a difficult one with Ukraine because you've never been like diagnosed with anything, and no one's ever said you've got PCOS or you've got this or you've got that. But you do carry high symptomology of potentially somebody who has got PCOS, for example, like really irregular, you were really irregular periods, like insulin resistance really, really high. And when you input or implement things to manage side effects of like a dysfunctional menstrual cycle, you tend to find that the menstrual cycle improves. So like, for example, the girls who have got PCOS, we're pretty sure without them going for an ovarian scan that they've got PCOS, they show all the symptomology of it, so we treat them like they have. Like their menstrual cycle becomes a lot more regular and the symptoms that they usually get diminish because we're controlling one of the outcomes or side effects of the menstrual dysfunction, which helps take the like if we look at the whole thing as a picture, if you can improve one element, often the other things improve as well. So it is interesting that that you found that. We've also obviously corrected your hormonal baseline, which was pretty poor before. And I think that's had a massive impact as well. So you're not like now you're not completely dysfunctional in like low levels of other hormones, right? So that will have helped you. And I think as well for most people, even without looking at like really intense stuff like whether they take a HRT to correct things or a replacement dose of testosterone, which is obviously a HRT, or they take like anything to improve other symptomology. I think even just getting on a consistent fitness journey, like having the same nutrition every single day, having the same sleep schedule, making sure your recovery is looked after, having the same training, like having all that suddenly in a routine, your body loves it. I've had people come to me before, I haven't had a period in months and months and months, and I don't perform any kind of miracles. I just give them a meal plan, tell them to train 5 days a week, manage to make sure they can recover, and within a month or two, they get their cycle back straight away. And they're like, wow, it's magic. It's like, it's not magic. It's just the fact that now you follow a good nutrition protocol, good training protocol, a good rest protocol, and you've stopped eating nothing and doing 400 hours of cardio a day. Now you've got your cycle back. So that will have had a massive impact as well, because you're the most consistent now you've ever been, right? So
I would argue it is pretty magic what you did, Mads.
yeah. Shout it louder.
I was pretty in the floor when I came to Mads last September and hadn't had a cycle for, I just looked on my app actually while we were talking, 225 days I hadn't had a cycle for. Yeah, it was pretty bad when I came to Mads, and 7 weeks later got my first cycle. So yeah, it was pretty magic for me, and now we have a little celebration every month.
We actually do, don't we? You're like, yes,
Yeah.
I got it again.
My friends always say now, I've never known anyone get so happy about getting their period every month than me.
It's important, right? Especially if you've really struggled. If you're someone who's never had it. And I think once you realise the importance of it, it is important. And it's something that I'll go through, like this goes a little bit off topic, but you have to understand as well, if you're an athlete who wants to do really well in this sport and you take some element of risk, like assistance, for example, like during a prep or for some growth phases, I will always try and manage and maintain someone's menstrual cycle through that whole thing, if I can. Even in like assisted off-season phases, we'll manage doses to make sure that someone doesn't lose their period. And if they do, we go through recovery phases to make sure someone gets it back. And if they're a high-level assisted athlete, like we make sure that they are in a position where even after prep, we prioritize just getting that back first, and nothing else happens until they've got it back. Like, if that means you don't compete for another year because it takes 5-6 months to get your cycle back, well, I don't fucking care, because otherwise, like, it'll be 18 months down the line and you'll be slagging me off that we didn't prioritize your period, and that is important as a female, because there is more to life than bodybuilding, even if you want to go to the Olympia. So there we go. It's a little bit
Can I
different if
ask a
people
quick question, Max?
go on.
Sorry. So on the slide, like before, you'd had about birth control being one of the like problem things that adds to like changes in your hormones. But if you have like, say on the slide you had like about like really long periods or them being really, really close together and stuff, is there other ways to deal with that then other than birth control, like hormonal birth control?
Yeah. So I'll come on to that now. So essentially, like, well brought on, the effect of hormonal contraception and what it does, and also then what you can do instead, potentially. Now, effective hormonal contraception. Now you said there how obviously your contraception now controls your periods. Now, what hormonal contraception does, people don't realize, is it stops the production of your natural hormones completely. Gone. See you later. Bye. Now, if you weren't taking any hormonal contraception and you, like Sam there, didn't have a period for 200 and however many days, that's not even a year, it's 10 months, 9 months. If you didn't have a period for that long, but you weren't taking any hormonal contraception, you'd think there was something wrong with your body, wouldn't you? You'd be like, I've not had a period in 10 months, like that can't be very good for me. That must mean my hormones are really low. Oh, that's not good. That is exactly what happens when you have hormonal contraception. When you take hormonal contraception, it bottoms out, flatlines your body's ability to be able to produce its own. So your own production of estrogen, your own production of progesterone, and then that nice increase and rise that you get in your testosterone, like none of that happens because you don't ovulate. So your hormones just stay in the bin. So any bleed that anybody gets on hormonal contraception is not an ovulatory bleed. It's not a period. So when people say like contraception makes their period more controlled, or before I was on the pill, my period is all over the place. Now on the pill, I have it every 28 days. No, you don't have it every 28 days. What you do is you don't take your pill for like a week, so you have a withdrawal bleed. That is not the same thing. So when you take contraception, you literally stop all the production of your natural hormones. Stop, gone. It thins your uterus lining because you don't get that estrogen spike. So you don't like that doesn't happen. Progesterone, estrogen doesn't drop off, then progesterone doesn't rise. None of that happens. So your uterus lining stays thin. It's not an environment to be able to embed an egg, even if you had one, and you don't release a matured, like there isn't a matured follicle, there isn't a matured egg. So when you have that break in your period, that bleed that you get, the reason why it's a light bleed, doesn't really cause you any pain, is because it's just a withdrawal bleed. So all that happens is you take out the synthetic hormones, your body then obviously realizes synthetic hormones have dropped, it goes through a little bit of shedding, sometimes it doesn't. I think I went like 8 years without any kind of bleed when I had the implant in my arm. So like that isn't a period. So with regards to your question, Becca, what a lot of people do when they go on contraception is they go on it because they've got an issue with their period. Like you'll go to the doctors and you'll be like, hey doctor, my period is like 50 days long. It's really, really annoying. It can't be good. Or it's every 11 days. Why is it every 11 days? Like I want to do something about that. Like they'll say, oh, go on the pill or go on this or go on that or have the injection to just stop having them all together. And you're like, yay, problem solved. Or go on the pill and like that'll regulate them. It doesn't regulate them, it just stops them from happening, it just turns the tap off. So it gives you an easier life because you know when you're going to bleed and when you're not, because you're in control of it. But what you do is you stop yourself from ovulating. Okay. So my recommendation always is to have a non-hormonal method and seek out why your period is every 10 days or every 50 days. Find the reason, because the doctors are quite quick to give you a hormonal contraception and say, there you go, problem solved, see you later. It's easy, doesn't cost them very much. Cost them about £7 a month for your prescription. So it's easy. So like you're all right because you're happy because it's better, but it's not better because if you're someone who has, say, got really, really bad skin as a teenager and the doctor gives you the pill to control your bad skin, what happens when you're like 30 and you want a baby? Well, when you come off the pill, your body probably, if you have bad skin before because of the way your body manages its hormones, when you come off the pill, you're just going to have bad skin again because that's the way your body manages its hormones. It doesn't really fix the problem. You just kind of like put it in the bin a little bit. So my philosophy, and there is reasons why some people will go on contraception, like everyone's individual, and it doesn't mean everything can be fixed. Like it doesn't mean everything can be fixed. But a lot of the time, like there just needs to be a bit more investigation, like a bit more investigation as to why maybe there are things that can be done to fix or improve your body's ability to have a good menstrual cycle. And I would always put people under pressure to really put the doctor under pressure. Because I think it's too easy with hormonal contraception, especially things like the injection, which I know we've spoken about. Like the injection is the most horrendous thing in the entire world. It's awful. The injection is literally like chemical castration. Like when you put that in your body, you can't take it out. So you have no idea when it's going to stop working. You have no idea the damage it does to you. A pill is something that has like a half-life. Like you don't take a pill, you miss one for a day, your hormones can bounce back quite quickly. Like when you put the injection in your body like that, it doesn't work like that. They say it's every 3 months, your body, it doesn't work like that. They did put a rule in place a few years ago that you can only take it for 2 years because of the damage it can do to your body. But I know doctors that give it to people for like 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, and they only stop because like somebody doesn't go back for it. The doctor never says don't come back for it. So like just the way that hormonal contraception works, just so everyone understands, like it completely stops you from ovulating at all. So sometimes people have problems getting their period back when they suddenly do decide they want it back in 5-10 years time. Because you then come off the pill and your body hasn't produced these hormones for so long, you just hope that your body remembers how to do it and it falls back into the cycle of being able to produce them. So that's what happens with hormonal contraception and the impact that it has on the body. This is a scaremonger thing, by the way. This is just a fact. Like a lot of people don't know this. The doctors don't tell you this particular thing. If you have a great doctor or like family planning nurse or whatever, then and they give you all this information, that's amazing. But most of the time when I have these conversations, like when me and Hannah Wares did the podcast, like there was just pennies dropping all over the place. Everyone was like, what the fuck? Because people don't understand this. So yeah, when you have a hormonal contraception, go on.
Yeah, to be honest, I feel a bit silly now, but you know, I'm nearly 46 years old, and I was on the hormonal contraception. So I was on the pill since I was, God, 17, 18 for 12 plus years, and pretty much I've never had skin problems. It's just because I didn't want to get pregnant. And I couldn't use condoms because back in the day there was no such thing as non-latex ones. These days you do have them, but no, because I'm allergic to latex. Haha. But never ever, no one, including my doctor, explained to me how it actually works. It's like, okay, you don't want to get pregnant. There you go. And 12 years on, it was constantly just repeat prescription, yeah, had more.
Yeah. And it's good, it's great, like it is great to control the population to an extent, to stop people having unwanted babies, and most people are absolutely fine. It's not a or anything. As long as it's managed and you understand it, it's absolutely fine. But it's more just so people understand how it works, you know, like
yeah, that's what I mean.
People think that they have a period. You're not having a period when you're taking any hormonal contraception. When you when you have something like now there's things like the copper coil, there is people who can't have that, but copper coil is obviously non-hormonal. It allows your natural cycle to continue. And there is positives of that. Like, you don't really want your natural hormones flatlined. If we go back and look at this, when people have a natural cycle, they feel dog shit here because everything drops off. If you take a hormonal contraception, especially something like the injection, awful, all of this just sits down here all the time. People who are on hormonal contraception often like give symptomology of like feeling depressed and feeling like tired and feeling like lack of libido and feel lack of this and lack of that. Well, are you surprised? You live in this state down here. Yeah, you probably do feel pretty shit. I would as well. So I did feel shit. That's why I came off my implant and put in testosterone to give me a bit of fucking normal life, and I've felt like a new woman within a week. So like that isn't a nice, that's not a place that you want to live, ideally. So there are reasons obviously why people take contraception, but just so you understand, obviously if you do, that's kind of where you live. It will affect like ability to be able to recover. It will affect ability to be able to grow. I'm not saying that if you are on contraception, you can't grow and you can't recover and you like your life shit. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you do lose the benefits of the female hormones, which are actually really good. Like estrogen is our super hormone. Like, we want it. It's very good. If we can maintain it and we can look after it, it's really positive. Like, it does a lot for us. It's good for our bones. It's good for everything. Like, it's great. So we want to manage it and look after it. But yeah, this is obviously just what I said. If you were taking something for 9 years, like imagine if you don't have a period for 9 years, that is what is happening. If you do have side effects for the reasons that you went on it, maybe you have really painful periods, so you go on hormonal contraception, so it's not painful anymore, you just stop it. If the reason why you've got a painful period is because you have PCOS, then when you come off the pill, and you're trying for a baby, you're still gonna have PCOS, and that might mean that you can't get pregnant, and then that's still a problem. So like, if there are reasons for it, I advise people to obviously look at why. But yeah, stops you having a period, doesn't necessarily fix anything, just brushes it under the carpet. Non-hormonal fixes where possible, and actually looking into the reasons why your period, like why these things are there. Like, actually do some research into it. Push with the doctors, push with the NHS, push to see somebody. Why is your bleed so irregular? Is it for more than this many days? Why has this happened? Why is that happening? Look for that and try and find out those reasons to why, as opposed to obviously just going on hormone contraception and almost putting a plaster on it for a bit. Okay. Some things you can take which help. I know people who've reduced their cycles down from like 60 odd days to like 40 days, which is still a massive improvement, is using Fertility Plus from Supplement Needs. That's been really good for people. They're just bringing out, I think it's in the post to me right now, is a PCOS product, which is about to be trialed. So that'll be exciting for people. And another thing you can do to help bring up hormones is put in hormonal baselines for like if you're an assisted athlete, for example, like bring your testosterone up the floor and put it in a normal place. And that can be really helpful for people who have HRT as well. When you get menopausal, you might take HRT from the doctors, which is like estrogen or progesterone synthetically, or synthetic estrogen and progesterone, but they miss out like testosterone, which, as you can see here, is a vital part of us. Like, we still need it. So that can have a massive impact. So yeah, wrapped up right on time with 1 minute left for questions. Fired through.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I'm going. So has anyone got anything they want to ask? Has anyone got any comments? Has anyone had any good experience, bad experiences? Anything anyone wants to share? Open forum.
I just think it was really, really useful, Mads, actually.
Love that.
Yeah, really useful. I think as women, we're just expected to know all this, right? Like, we're just expected to automatically know how we bleed and why and what stages. And I just think it was really useful from my perspective. Almost as a refresh of bits. So yeah.
Refresh.
I agree.
It's always hard to know what people know.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's good to assume, you know, we don't know anything unless, like, very little. I think as you've just highlighted, like in the bodybuilding world, there's a lot of misinformation. So actually what is true and what we
Yeah.
really know probably isn't right anyway, if that makes sense, or is along, is very minimal. Not all of us. I mean, there's some experienced women in this group like yourself, but I mean, just in general, it's always probably safe to say, from my experience of talking to people as well, because there's so many preconceptions and misinformation about that out there.
Yeah, well, I must say, like, until I got a coach, I did train, but I just couldn't understand why there are some weeks in the month that my strength is off the roof and I can just perform excellent, and then some days it was just absolutely crap. And then it all, it's like a light bulb moment when your coach explains to you, like you explained to us, that it's a lot to do with it. It's got actually with your cycle, that it affects your ability and your mood and how you perform and how you actually doing in the gym, and obviously how it affects your performance in your exercises, which sometimes is really frustrating.
Yeah, good.
There's a lot of information out there. Like, for example, when I first joined, I just had a super regular cycle where it was either very short or very, very long, and then I just gave it a routine. And I had also just come off copper coil, which, I don't know, contraception didn't really seem to work for me. Like, I was either like I had very like bad anxiety, or I put on like loads of weight. It just wasn't working, so I just didn't feel too comfortable. And then I started using natural cycles, and all these like big word like progesterone and luteal phase and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, it feels like so overwhelming when you actually have to go through it yourself. And you're like, am I being absolutely dumb that I just don't understand this thing and how it works? But actually having somebody spelling it out and just going through every single phase is so useful. Tomorrow morning when I'm going to take my temperature on natural cycle, I'm going to be like a pro.
Grateful for the period. Love that. I love that. It's important. It's important. So important. Super important. Good. I hope that's useful. Has anyone else got any questions?
But there has been another woman killed.
I've actually got a quick question, if that's okay.
Go on, G. Yeah, go on, ask away. That's why I'm sat here quietly waiting for people to shout at me. Go on.
So obviously I have PCOS, and I'm on like I can't remember the name of it, but a continuous pill. So like obviously I don't have a break from it. So from that I get like, sometimes I won't get a period, sometimes I do. Obviously they're not real ones, but could potentially like being on like, sort of a hormonal contraception, could that have caused even more issues in regards to like PCOS or anything like that? Because I've noticed, obviously, like I've come on over the past like 5 days, and these past 2 days I have felt absolutely lifeless, but I've never experienced a dip in energy like this before. Like I was walking around like a zombie yesterday, and it's nothing I've ever experienced before. Obviously, I've got a lot of stress going on at the moment, but it's just kind of hit me like with obviously you mentioning about like the hormones and everything, and I just didn't know if potentially that could be kind of related.
Potentially, like your circumstances, I know you've joined me recently, but we haven't implemented or done anything apart from trying to manage your insulin resistance a little bit, like to have an impact on your hormones. You might be going through a bit of a regeneration with your thyroid because we took out T4. So that might be coinciding with a little bit of like a little slump in energy. T4's got a half-life of 5 to 7 days before it's going to start regenerating. How does that time? Is that about right? 7 days?
I'm trying to think. It's probably been about 2 weeks since T4's been out and the thyroid supplement's been in.
So it could be that. Obviously, you got. It could be that. You could also be in. There's a number of things with the question with your contraception. Like, no, not really. I think what you're doing when you, and a lot of reason why people take contraception when they have PCOS or given it, is because when you got PCOS, your hormones tend to be dysfunctional. And this is why often like you get cysts on your ovaries, because PCOS is polycystic ovary syndrome. Obviously, you get cysts on your ovaries because your body, the way that your estrogen, your progesterone all work in this lovely harmony. When you got PCOS, not all the time, but often, your ovulation is all over the place because your body struggles to ovulate, and that's why you get these cysts on your ovaries, right? When you take the pill, you take that function away completely. So it shouldn't really have any effect, to be honest. It won't make it worse, definitely, because you stop the ovulation process when you go on the pill. Girls that I've got who've got PCOS, apart from you, obviously you've only just joined me, so we're still doing this together, but none of them take any hormonal contraception, and we just manage pretty much everything through means of trying to reduce symptoms, managing insulin resistance, things like that. And most of them are very, very, very comfortable and have very, very minimal side effects now around their period. But that's something we could potentially discuss down the line. Like if you wanted to take it out and just try and have an actual cycle, like how irregular or irregular were your cycles previous to the pill? If you don't mind saying before.
No, it's fine. So to be honest, I was a very late bloomer. I didn't actually start any cycles until really, really late down the line. I think I was like 15 or so. And at that point, I pretty much went straight on the pill. So I don't really know what my kind of natural cycle is like. And I was actually put on the pill before I was diagnosed with PCOS, and probably had been on the pill for quite a few years before that. So it's been, I've never known it regular. And I've trialed so many different forms of contraception. I've tried the injection, that didn't work. I tried the coil, I was in too much pain with that. And it's resulted me being back on the pill. So yeah, I feel like my body's just been absolutely through it and it's a mess.
Yeah. Sometimes it's about finding what works for you as well. Like some people will need contraception, obviously, to stop getting pregnant, obviously. And if you're one of those people, like, and the coil doesn't work for you, then like you may be like, the only option for me is the pill. So yeah, like that's obviously something to manage and to think about. Like your testosterone sits like really high. Like you don't have this massive dip in testosterone. So from a recovery muscle building perspective, like it's actually quite supportive of that. The issue that you get alongside PCOS, the fact that you're often very insulin resistant, which doesn't help you manage food very well, doesn't help you manage carbohydrates well, can mean you struggle to get lean, can mean that you get a bit fatter than you want to in the off season. You very successfully prepped on quite a good amount of food before, so it's not necessarily where you're at. But we're seeing some signs of that now, right? So it's like, okay, well, we need to manage that. But I think sometimes it's about finding what works. Obviously, if you like anyone on this call, like if you're in a partnership with somebody, relationship, don't know why I said partnership, relationship with somebody, like, and you're trying obviously not to get pregnant, then you do have to be realistic about what is going to work for you from a lifestyle perspective as well. Like you have to, and what risk you're willing to take with that, and then what's going to improve the quality of your life and what's a priority. So I'm not here to slam contraception at all. Like it's very good and it stopped the population here, like in the world, being fucking ridiculous by using it. Like it's great. As long as you understand it, it's just about me making sure that you understand what it does, you understand the process. A lot of people think they still have a period and they don't. So it's just like understanding what that is. But a lot of people will take contraception to minimize side effects of things, of course. So it's up to you, Maddie. It's something we can talk about. Like we can definitely talk about it down the line if you wanted to come off it or whatever. But I don't think, I mean, I know quite a bit, but I'm not an expert in, not a gynecologist, you know, like I'm not a total expert in these things. And I know I've spent a lot of time educating myself, but I would say realistically, just through logic, that you taking the pill is definitely not going to make your PCOS any worse. If anything, it's probably going to help it be stable because you're not trying to ovulate. Therefore, you're not going to increase the problems that you potentially have there. So yeah, like I wouldn't say so. It might just be a coincidence with everything else that's going on in life as well, potentially.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Stress is a killer, you know.
Two more.
Cortisol kills everything. Cortisol is fucking horrendous. Keep it out of your life.
Just got something to add to that, Mads, if that's okay, because I've had
Yeah, go on.
quite a similar experience to Maddie. So as you know, I've got endometriosis, so I was diagnosed in February of this year, and then I started with you in April. So literally, I'd been on the mini pill for like 3 weeks before joining yourself. And I mean, I started my period at like 14. I went on contraception at 16, and then I was on the combined pill for probably 6 years, I want to say. And then it took me years when my period started going diagnosed. So I was, appointment after appointment. Eventually had the surgery and they said, yeah, you've got it, which to be fair, I kind of knew at that point. It was just kind of like, thanks, yeah, nothing new. And I then found out from the doctor or the consultant that actually, because I was on the combined pill for so long, that could have actually worsened my symptoms from an endometrial point of view, to the point where like it could affect me in the future. So like, I've had a period for 4 months straight, and like no breaks and like full on, not just like a little kind of bit here and there. So I've had struggles with it, but I've tried, like Maddie said, multiple things. I've tried the coil, I've tried the mini pill, I've tried the combined, like basically everything other than the implant and the injection. The mini pill works for me, but there's still stuff that aren't like quite right that you're talking about, like blood glucose levels, and we've been kind of monitoring them over the last couple of weeks. And we found one kind of abnormality, but the last 2 days I've been over 6. So I'm like, could this be a sign of something else? Could this be PCOS? And then how is that going to affect me when I actually come to prep?
Yeah. The one interesting thing about it's really difficult, and it's every single pill as well. There's loads on this. Every single pill, every single mini pill, every single normal pill, combined pill, they all have different synthetic hormones. So like, for example, they might have X amount of estrogen, X amount of progesterone in, but they're not real progesterone, not real estrogen, and they're all different types of synthetic hormones. So what Hannah's saying there, and I feel like she's just fallen off the call. What Hannah's saying there, right, is I can completely appreciate. It's probably very true and realistic, because different doses of things and different hormones are going to affect people differently. And I think it is just finding what works for you. Like Maddie, if you find that what you're doing works for you and it makes it manageable, then there's an ideal world, right? And in an ideal world, people wouldn't have menstrual dysfunction, but we're not in an ideal world. We live in the fucking, is what it is, right? So like, we have to find a way to make things possible. If you're the most super optimal human ever and you didn't have any issues, I'd be like, no, don't take the fucking combined pill, because that's not great. Like, let's fuck that off. But there is like a lesser of evils, right? And if you can't function very well and you don't feel great without it, then I would probably say, yeah, like finding the right contraception to suit you so you can actually function, like the minimal amount is going to affect you from like a training and an athlete perspective. You'd probably have a worse time if you weren't taking it like Hannah does, and therefore you wouldn't be able to train at all, which is even worse. So we have to find like the lesser of two evils. I'd potentially say if you oh, Hannah, my phone died, fuck. What you could do if you've not been off anything ever is maybe come off completely, like, and just see how you feel. I don't know. Yeah, Hannah, I was like, oh, Hannah's just dropped off. Good. I was just saying, like, different pills, different things have different levels of synthetic hormones in, and every synthetic hormone is also different. So each pill will have a different synthetic hormone, like a different type of estrogen, different type of progesterone. So you might feel differently on it, different doses. Obviously, your doctor's giving you advice to do one thing instead of another. So like, some things will agree with people more than others. And then like those side effects as well, coming back onto what you said, Hannah, about like your blood glucose, you've had 2 mornings where it's like 6. It's not necessarily like published data, but I was doing some reading maybe like 2 months ago and speaking to Dean about this, that people with endometriosis have very similar symptoms to people with PCOS in terms of like insulin resistance. Now, not everybody, and it's not necessarily consistent. And this is why I've got you measuring it all the time, because I'm trying to gather a bit of data and like, okay, are you having exactly the same symptoms? And they think it's due to like the impact that the issue has. So like PCOS is hormonal, endometriosis isn't, but the symptomology looks the same in people. Like the side effects looks very, very similar in people. So it's like, okay, well, if the side effects are similar, even if the thing is different, should you still treat the side effects the same? Because regardless of what's causing it, like the outcome is still the same, right? So yeah, that's interesting. So there's like a bit of PubMed stuff on it, but there's not a lot. There's not that much research into endometriosis, which you obviously will know about as well. There's not that much on it. Like it's not that much published stuff. Whereas there is with PCOS, and I think probably because PCOS is a little bit easier to understand because it's often like actually directly hormonal, whereas endometriosis, like they actually struggle to understand why people end up with it. Like it's not very obvious. And it's a little bit of a minefield. There are some very good experts out there that understand it very well. But yeah, everybody's different. But I would try it, Maddie, if you want to. Maybe we can talk about it off here, but it might
Yeah,
be worth...
yeah, definitely. One thing that they always, like the doctors always said to me, because I actually talked to them once about it and basically said how like, would it be worth me kind of like coming off it altogether? And they were like, oh no, you don't want to do that because that's going to mess up your hormonal balance too much if you just completely cut it out. Like, is that just false?
I guess what they're saying is if you take it out, your hormones will be able to do whatever they want, so you won't be in control of it. So yeah, you probably will be fairly imbalanced and your periods might be all over the place, but you don't really know because you've never done it. So
yeah,
you don't necessarily know. Like they are right in that sense. Like obviously if you take the pill or you take any kind of contraception, your levels of hormones are totally managed, right? Like totally managed. So yeah, I would say that what they're saying is right to an extent, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
yeah,
Like if you've been on contraception ever since you like had a period, you don't even know what your natural cycle looks like. You haven't got a
yeah.
clue. You haven't got a clue. So yeah, interesting. Anyone else got any super random things? Super random menstrual things? The female body's complex, man. Females are way more complicated to coach than males. I'll tell you that for free.
Mads,
Males.
can you just go over the effects of dopamine and training? Sorry, not dopamine. Oh my gosh, estrogen and dopamine, they kind of affect each other, but I'm I'm actually wondering about what you're talking about with estrogen and around the ovulation phase and like your recovery time being better and everything.
Yeah, estrogen is like estrogen binds to the androgen receptor or helps to. So like essentially it's like a really, really good growth anchor for females. I mean for males as well, like when males take loads and loads and loads of anti-estrogens and they're on testosterone, like they are not as efficient at growing. Your estrogen helps protect your vital organs, helps protect your heart, helps keep cortisol down, helps with like water management, even though there's an old saying like in guys like, oh, if your estrogen's really high, you're really watery. Like it's not really how it works, but it has loads of positive effects on like growth anchors. So that's why it's helpful. It kind of acts a little bit like testosterone in men and women, I guess, if you want to think of it like that. So that's why it's good and you don't really want to take it away. I often find as well that girls who have, from anecdotal experience, like really, really low levels of estrogen. I have a lady in Spain who, and she doesn't mind me talking about it, takes tamoxifen every single day. And if you don't know what tamoxifen is, if you've got a boyfriend who's a bodybuilder, you may have heard the phrase like AI, anti-estrogen. It's kind of like that. Well, it is like that, basically. It's an anti-estrogen tablet. And guys might take, if they aromatize and get puffy nipples, maybe 0.5 milligram every few days. She takes a full one every single day. She's had breast cancer previously, and it was estrogen-induced breast cancer, they think, hormonally induced. So she takes a anti-estrogen every single day. The ability for me to be able to try and prep her, to be able to get her lean, to be able to put muscle on her, to be able to change her is very, very, very difficult, because her body's constantly under stress, constantly has high amounts of water retention. She's always got edema in her ankles. She really struggles to get lean because her ability to be able to recover from like a muscle synthesis standpoint is like really low. So she doesn't utilize her food very well. So like she has zero estrogen. If you get a blood test done, like zero. She takes tamoxifen every single day. Every day.
That's what I was a bit shocked, because when I heard the name, I was like, oh my God, my mum was on it. My mum was a cancer patient.
Yeah, so she's a cancer patient.
That's
So yeah, every single day. And like, just from anecdotal experience, Laura, like you need estrogen. The body needs estrogen. But yeah, in terms of growth, like it's if you like to do a little bit of geeky reading, I'll pull up some PubMeds for you and I'll send you some tonight so you can do some geeky reading about how estrogen works. But
Yeah,
because it is interesting.
yeah, that's really cool. Thank you. It's really informative. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. Like estrogen spikes are good. It's why you feel good in the follicular phase. Often, like after the period's gone, like you feel pretty fucking good. That's usually why estrogen's on the rise. Recovery is better, sleep is better. Like the body, it's like the holy grail for women, estrogen. But I'll send you some PubMeds. Like they're not difficult to read, and like fucking hell, you're a fucking educated person. You'll understand them. You don't have to be like a fucking doctor to understand them. Like they're very easy to read. They just talk about what it does, and I'll send them over to you. But essentially that's it. Like it's a massive growth anchor for females. It binds at the androgen receptor. Androgens is, well, synthetic androgens are like Anavar, Primo, testosterone. Like as a female, you have 3 androgens in the body. Your testosterone is an androgen. Like, so it helps bind at the androgen receptor, which is essentially your growth anchor. So yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, and it has loads of other functionalities. Loads. Any more questions?
I think it's really good that you brought this topic up, because we don't as women, we don't talk about it enough, do we?
No.
And we're not really very well educated, are we, considering we all go through this?
I think like from my perspective as well. So before this, I was kind of into powerlifting, and my strength it was so variable, and I didn't realize it was actually coming down to my hormones and everything like that. So it's so interesting to learn about. And I do think that even a lot of female coaches, they don't necessarily understand their own like hormonal cycles or their own contraceptives. So, you know, they don't really understand maybe even necessarily what their clients are going through, because they've been on contraceptives for so long. Like not to their fault, obviously, but it is really important to have these conversations. So it's good to talk about it. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, like estrogen has a massive impact as well, like on your libido. So this is why as well, like when you come up to ovulation, like people are like, oh my God, like my sex drive's through the roof. Yeah, like your estrogen is like peaking. Testosterone's coming to a peak. Your body's like, fucking come on. Like, so I remember when I was, and I'll be super open about this stuff, I don't care. When I was on contraception for years, I had the implant in my arm for like 9 years. I had it replaced 3 times, fucking terrible. I don't ever remember really having like a massive, like a sex drive. I was in relationships and I was like, yeah, okay, because that's what you do. But I never, ever was like, felt like I had some sort of like fucking estrogen surge ever. I was like, meh. Like, and I think that is purely hormonal. When I took it out, my testosterone was low, everything was obviously in the floor. I put testosterone replacement in and got my cycle back within, I was really lucky, I got it back really quickly. It was like 3 weeks, really quick. But I think because I had that hormonal testosterone baseline in to help bring up my estrogen quickly because of the way that estrogen is created in the body, I felt, honestly, I was like, wow, this is what normal feels like. Unreal. Love this. Missed out on this for 9 years. How shit is that? So when you know the difference, if anyone's been on contraception, then come off it. I don't know if anyone's been in that situation, but you feel the difference.
Absolutely.
That's where I am at the moment.
changes your relationship, because when your partner knows as well what time it is and when it's coming around, they know what to expect. And when you're just like, look, it's not you, I just want to chill this week, you know, but it's coming around again.
Literally, it's so true.
That's where I am at the moment though, Mads, because I've got, even though with the HRT I've got nothing at all, no sex drive whatsoever. And it's sad really, because I know what it's been like before.
Yeah, you probably need a bit more estrogen, maybe a bit more testosterone as well.
I think I'm on 100 and I'm on the test gel, which is crap. So yeah,
Test gel is crap.
Something we'll have to talk about maybe.
Yeah, I said that to you, didn't I, when we first spoke? Like the test isn't amazing, because you just can't dose it very well, and you just don't absorb it. Like if you got your bloods done, probably be pretty low. So yeah, replacement of testosterone really makes a big difference, and then obviously your HRT will help. Like 100 milligrams of estrogen, or estrogen is good. Like it's actually quite a lot. But I say it's quite a lot. It's not a lot. It's just it's more than the minimum dose, right? Minimum dose I think they're putting is 50. So it's like it's a good amount. I'd probably say testosterone will probably help a little bit. Well, it will help. Like I would say that was the biggest factor for me, was having a good level of testosterone in it. A good level of testosterone, which helped massively. You've done well to get the Testogel prescribed by the doctor though, really well. Most people can't get that.
I fought very hard for it, but yeah, they weren't keen. But yeah, I did fight for it.
Yeah. I'm just gonna send you an article, Laura, here from PubMed that I've got saved. Send you this. So yeah, all good. Anyone else got any questions? I'm glad that was useful. I feel like it was way more interactive. I'm going to talk about periods all the time now.
Oh, that's brilliant.
As people seem to like it. Because you relate to it, right? It's interesting. Right. Okay. So thank you, everyone. If you've got any more questions, please just ask. If you haven't, I will let you go. I'm going to upload this anyway. Been on here an hour and a half. I'm going to upload this anyway. Thank you for everyone who stayed on the whole time. I appreciate I've taken up your Sunday evening, but I will put this on YouTube. So if anyone wants to go back and watch it or refer to it, then you can. But obviously, if anyone wants to talk to me about it, just message me like you normally would. All good. So thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.